Former world leaders, some of them are calling for more international cooperation in the face of the pandemic and the obvious economic fallout. One of them, former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. He's now president of the Asia Society Policy Institute in New York. And here's what he told our Akiko Fujita.
The Americans led. They established it at summit level. They convened a summit within 2 months of the Lehman's collapse in Washington, in fact, 6 weeks. We had a global program of action in terms of coordinated stimulus, also what we would do in terms of coordinated monetary policy action, and thirdly, and critically, an agreed global moratorium on protectionism. And when we met again 3 months after that at the London summit in April of 2009, it was the resolutions of that summit and the concrete policy packages which came off it, which broke the fall in global financial markets. In other words, that's what actually turned the corner in the recovery. Now, therefore, in terms of the current global machinery, whether it's G7 or critically G20, because China is around that table and it's not around the G7 table, and the G20 represents 90% of the global economy, not just 40 or 45% of it, the lag in time from January through March in convening a G20 summit was frankly a major missed opportunity. And in the end, it took the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to convene and not the United States to convene an emergency gathering, even though the G20 was an American creation. So this, I think, points to, in both cases, the US sharing some of the responsibility for there not being an effective globally coordinated response.
Akiko, it's really interesting to see the United States take a back seat when for so many years we were the leader that everyone turned to.
Yeah, that's right. And it's important to put this all in context because Kevin Rudd, when he was Prime Minister of Australia back in 2008, played a key role in calling for that G20 meeting in Washington that has been credited with crafting that global coordinated response. We've seen that as well as some other international institutions really push to the back of the conversation this time around. I did have a chance to ask Kevin Rudd, what exactly he thinks of the policy response this time around from the US. And he credited the Fed for essentially keeping financial markets, not just in the US, but supporting the markets globally this time around in the absence of US leadership. And one more thing he noted, because Kevin Rudd, of course, has some big insights on China, a lot of eyes and ears on the ground there. He says there's a real debate that's happening internally right now about how exactly China should respond, given the absence of some significant stimulus we've seen so far. He says that those debt levels within the country are likely to really hamper the kind of levers they can have to prop up the economy. He sees just about 0% growth this time around.
Akiko, I'm also curious if you talked about the sort of mudslinging, for lack of a better term, between the US and China, specifically over the virus, right? Allegations back and forth about the origins of the virus, allegations from the US about China misrepresenting its numbers, et cetera, and what that does to the relationship.
Exactly. And that's something that Kevin Rudd has pointed to. He recently penned an op-ed in The Economist where he called for a separate organization, what he called the M7, countries like France, countries like Japan and Germany to come together to not just keep the US and China in check, but keep these global institutions in check. Because as he sees it, the blame isn't just on the two largest economies, but also on institutions like the WHO, as well as some of these other multilateral organizations that just haven't stepped up or have been slow to act this time around. So it's interesting to see his response on that front. And we should point out he's not the only G20 leader from 2008 that has been raising the red flag. We've heard a lot from former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown also talking about the lack of a coordinated response this time around and how that could hinder the global economic recovery.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.